CURES is sponsored by Wheeler Health's Better Choice program. More at wheelerhealth.org.
Helping you lead a healthier life. This is Kara's Cures.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to the CURES Show, where we explore the cutting edge of wellness from credible sources for our mind, body, and spirit. I'm Kara Sundlin, and as you may know, June is Men's Health Awareness Month. So I would really like to focus on men's mental health today. And I know whether you're a man watching this show or you are caring about the men in your life, it's so important to raise awareness about the health issues that men face so that they can get the help they need. They're often more reluctant to get the care that they need. I'm here with Dr. Laura Saunders, who is a psychologist at the Institute of Living with Hartford HealthCare. Dr. Laura Saunders, thanks for being with us.
Thank you for having me, Kara.
Why are men more at risk for maybe not getting the treatment that they should?
So this is a great topic to be talking about. And actually, this is one of the reasons why I love like these awareness months, right? May being men's health awareness. We're going to focus a little bit more on mental health awareness because mental health and lifestyle factors really do impact men's overall physical health. And we already know, we say it all the time, there is no physical health without mental health and vice versa. The reason that we are looking at this is oftentimes there are cultural norms or stereotypes that prevent men from asking for help, for acknowledging or identifying what it is that might be going on with them. Oftentimes they're in a level of denial about the seriousness of something, which means that they don't seek out preventative care, and therefore it impacts their longer term health functioning. Overall physical health functioning, but really is also the mental health factors that are equally as important.
Right. The leading cause of death among men in the United States is heart disease. That's 1 in every 4 male deaths, although heart disease is also, people don't realize, the leading cause of death among women. But when we talk about mental health, I think that we really try to let people know that your physical and your mental health are so connected. But is it, when you say societal norms, is it because men are taught more from a young age to just muscle through, to maybe not express their feelings as much?
Yeah, I think we're getting better about this, but if you think about the men, and the ages or generation of men who are, dealing with some of these more significant health factors, they're men that were born in the 40s, 50s, and 60s, where a lot of these kind of more rigid, strict cultural and gender norms played an impact. So the more we can pull away some of those kind of social strictures on acknowledging that you need help or asking for help, or opening up about how you feel about something, to not bottle things up. We do know that men tend to be more what we call, or it starts out in children and adolescents, externalizers, meaning they externalize their behavior, as opposed to women tend to be more internalizers, where they internalize their behavior. They become more kind of depressed and withdrawn, and men become more kind of angry and aggressive. And so it's really looking at some of those stereotypes or those cultural norms and what are the origins of it, so we can start to unpack and address things in a more healthy way for everyone.
How do we, as the people who are supporting men in our life, for myself, I would think of my husband or my son, how do we help the men in our life focus on their mental health?
I think it actually is about being the best role model that you can be, for your spouses or your, brothers or your uncles, or the men of a different generation, that you really encourage and emphasize how much them taking care of themselves is important to you and to your family. For our kids, for our nephews and the younger generation, it really is being a role model about seeking help and seeking support and being more open. That's the best way that you can show that talking about things is important, and identifying feelings and managing the lifestyle factors that really impact overall physical health.
What are you most concerned about when it comes to lifestyle, that men perhaps are putting themselves more at risk than women perhaps?
I think there's a couple of things. We're talking about activity level, physical activity level. We're talking about alcohol or substance use. We're talking about diet and nutrition, right? We know that obesity is a significant problem, that alcohol or substance use can be a significant problem. Certainly smoking as a lifestyle factor that contributes to both mental and physical health. So really looking at those lifestyle behaviors and how it impacts your long-term well-being.
So, for instance, in a family, if in a nuclear family for men and women, these are stereotypes, so it may not always be that way. But if a man is super stressed about work or finances, how might he react differently or behave differently so we can get a better understanding?
So that's a great way to look at it. So I do think when you talk about stressors, as I said, there's a little bit more of a tendency for men to be externalizers. So they might be more angry and irritable. They might be more avoidant, wanting to be out of the house or wanting to do things on their own. And, the instead of addressing what the core issue is, and it could be financial stress, it could be all sorts of things, to feel like you carry the financial burden of a family without maybe sharing that your partner, your spouse also may need to work some to reduce the financial burdens, doing things more actively and being more open about that stress as opposed to believing that, as the man, I need to manage it all, right? I'm thinking of like these broad shoulders, like you just need to manage it all and not ask for help and not acknowledge that there's problems. That's really what leads to bigger issues because that kind of stress really, really affects your physical health in the long term.
Yeah, I mean, do men suffer from anxiety as much as women do?
I don't know if they have the same rates of anxiety, but I think, as I said, they tend to be more externalizers. So where women might be more kind of what we call ruminative or anxious, where they sort of mull things over and over and over again, men tend to be a little bit more externalizers and maybe take it out on the people, the whole what we call displacement, right? So, the husband or spouse gets angry at the wife and then the wife gets angry at the kids, and then the kids get angry at the dog. We call displacement sometimes the kick the dog, because it just trickles down. When you don't address the true sources of what's going on, it sort of trickles down in the sometimes power hierarchy of a family.
Now, sometimes the biggest stress, even in loving relationships, can be kids, right? Couples argue a lot about kids. And what's your advice to reduce the stress in that area, to maybe help our husbands or our partners with their mental health? I think as women, we kind of take the brunt of all that we're doing and organizing. We might lash out at them for not doing enough or not doing it the way we want it done. There can be a lot of conflict around kids, and that can cause a lot of mental health stress. So let's help break that down. What would be better ways? You can play couples therapist for a moment.
Right. So actually coming at this from what we call a systems or family systems perspective, it's okay in a two-parent family that, parent A takes on one role and parent B takes on another role. What you want there to be is a sense of like shared cooperation. So it's not that parent A, again, oftentimes it tends to be the male or the husband or the father who, feels like they need to be a wage earner and they're more distant, whereas the mom or the mother is the one that has to do all the day-to-day detailed work, that really looking at more of a shared experience. But it's okay that people take on different roles. We don't need everyone to be exactly the same in a partnership. It's okay that they're different. It's okay that they have different styles of parenting or different ways that they come about, the parenting perspective. But what's important is that in that situation is that they communicate, right? That they communicate what they expect, what their values are, what they're hoping for. When problems arise, what kind of problem solving style do you have? It's, especially for younger couples, I think really discussing those things and hammering out a lot of those maybe differences in style are real important for the long-term health and well-being of a relationship.
So sort of like when we watch a cop show and it's okay to be good cop, bad cop, but you understand that that's what's going on, and that doesn't have to stay that way all the time. Just would you recommend maybe some game planning among parents, like actually talking about what role you're playing and, having some private conversations? They say it's really bad to fight in front of your kids, right?
Well, I mean, it's not so bad that you have conflict, but when you have conflict in front of your kids, what often happens is then at a later point they reconnect and resolve the conflict. But so then kids don't see the resolution or the problem solving aspect of the conflict. So if you have disagreements, all parents have disagreements. It's unrealistic to think that's not going to happen. But in those disagreements, it's also important to circle back around and show that, okay, well, I just want to let you know that you saw your dad and I saw your mom and I arguing earlier about topic X, but I want you to know that, we've come back and we've discussed this and, this is our plan, so that you circle back around and don't just show the conflict side of it, but you actually manifest the conflict resolution part of it as well.
Okay. So for men specifically, if they're feeling very anxious, what you're saying is they might present differently. It could come as anger, and that can happen with boys as well. Or it might just look, I think this is more the case in my house, like nothing's wrong, like everything's okay, but they might be more of an internalizer. So how can you help someone who's either lashing out or internalizing everything?
Well, we know the patterns of the loved ones in our lives. And, that's the beauty of, long-term relationships and connections is, what their typical patterns are. That when your spouse is completely withdrawing or really showing a lot more frustration and anger about even little things, that's often a sign that they're worried about something. And so it's bringing that up and talking about it in a more open way. I noticed, I always like to start with I statements, right? I noticed you've been more withdrawn this week, or I noticed you've been more angry and irritable this week. Is there something going on that you want to share? And I'm worried or concerned about you, right? You throw in a little bit of your feelings into this. I'm here to help share some of the burden. So really it's understanding the pattern in your loved one, making an I statement and bringing that to light, and then offering to be part of the solution and not just trying to blame someone else.
Yeah, I know as women, we can, we can get upset and we can take things out. I think it goes both ways. But if you're trying to help, as we talk about men's mental health awareness, and it is connected to physical health, so many times we're the ones who are making all the doctor's appointments and making the dentist appointments and trying to make sure. So that's one thing to help, like just getting those regular checkups, those annual physical exams, really, really important for both your physical and your mental health. Can you elaborate?
Yes. So, one of the things that we look at when we look at overall health, right? Mental health and physical health really are the preventative things that we can do. It is actually much harder to deal with a problem when it is, full blown, right? It could be, someone has an anxiety disorder or depression. When they are months into that either depressive or anxious state, it's actually harder to deal with it than if it's in the early stages. In the same way, we want the men in our lives to get all the preventative things, regular checkups, any screenings for based on risk factors. There's a family history of colon cancer, there's a family history of prostate cancer, right? We want them to get those screenings based on particular risk factors in a family. So the more we can encourage the men in our lives to do the things that they need to do to take care of themselves. Because the other significant issue here is, even if a more chronic medical or mental health issue is identified, it actually is adherence to treatment, taking medication as prescribed, following up with, ongoing treatment or expectations or lifestyle changes. It's not just the identification, it's actually the follow-up and the management of whatever your risk factors are that are so important for dealing with any kind of long-term or chronic medical or mental health issues.
It's so important to break down the stigma. I'm a huge fan of therapy. I mean, I've gone off and on for years and years. Obviously, I love to talk to you and get free therapy on this show and on Great Day. If you have a man in your life who just says, no, therapy's not for me, that won't work for me, I don't need that, what do you say to that?
So I hear this all the time, right? Sometimes maybe couples are struggling with issues and they talk to their spouse, they talk to their husband or partner, and the partner says, no, I'm not going to go to therapy. Well, then go yourself, right? We can't manage anyone else's life for them. We have to take care of ourselves and then express our concern in a more open in fashion. But we can't force anyone to do something, right? You can't drag someone to their, internal medicine or primary care doctor, but you can actively encourage them. You can be a role model yourself for wanting to eat better and wanting to get some physical exercise and activity and wanting to, do the things that either prevent longer term chronic issues or manage better longer term or chronic issues. So it really just starts with that openness and that encouragement. But the reality is we can't force people, and they have that free will, but we can be the best role model we can possibly be.
It gets more complicated when you're in relationship with someone who is a parent, right, to your kids, and there can be conflict around that or concerns around that. I wrote a whole book on this, on finding dad and the importance of that father relationship, which in my research I found it really affected self-esteem for kids or their place in the world, and that at any point having some healing in that area could be profound. What do you want to say about the role that fathers play and that men play in the family? Because sometimes perhaps they underestimate that they're just as important as the mother.
1 second. So I love this question because I get this all the time, especially in families or situations where maybe one parent's a little bit more estranged. It is so important for the long-term emotional development of young people to have a connection to both their parents. If they have a mother and a father, to have some connection to the father, even if that father wasn't a good spouse or partner in a relationship. It is so important. And as long as there's not an unsafe person, right? We're not talking about like extreme situations like abusive situations. But it is so important for the long-term emotional development of children to have a relationship with both their parents, that whatever you need to do as the other partner, the other spouse, to encourage that relationship, it's important. Even if you think that person was not a good partner, they still can serve some positive role in their role as a parent. So I think really encouraging and being open to that, even if you have negative feelings about that parent, that you allow your children to not be burdened with your perceptions of what you didn't like about that person, and let them form their own impressions and perceptions. That is so important for a child's long-term overall, emotional development and well-being.
Yeah. We're going to take a quick moment to just hear from a sponsor, and we'll come back to talk about more men's mental health.
Struggling with gambling? Wheeler Health's Better Choice program offers personalized support and treatment to help you regain control. Visit wheelerhealth.org to learn more and take the first step towards recovery today.
And I'm here with Dr. Laura Saunders for Men's Health Awareness Month. We're talking about specifically men's mental health, which of course is connected to their physical health. I want to just take a little bit of a deeper dive in what we were just talking about the importance of fathers. Perhaps the father wasn't the best dad, or wasn't involved, wasn't the best partner, maybe is the reason the relationship broke up. Even if they didn't, maybe they did quote unquote bad things, as long as they're not unsafe. You mentioned we're not encouraging anyone to stay in an abusive relationship, but to have relationships with the children, even if they messed up, maybe they left the family, maybe they didn't do everything correct. Does the repair, does the coming back, should we encourage that? Should the kids even leave room for that as something that could be positive?
So I really like to use that word because it really has to do with the strength of any relationship, right? In this case, we're talking about relationships with parents. The strength of that relationship is based on the repair. All relationships have some rupture, have some disconnect, but the strength of the relationship comes back to the repair. So even if you have a parent that's been estranged at some point, or in situations where there's separation or divorce or disconnect, finding it in your heart and in your mind, as long as there's nothing seriously abusive or safety issues, because that is a different situation. But to work on the repair of a relationship actually helps with long-term healing, right? To see that you can have a rupture or disconnect in a relationship and come back around and repair it is so, so important for long-term well-being.
And as we talk about those lifestyle changes as well, perhaps there's some unhealthy coping mechanisms going on. Alcohol, or in today's world, we're hearing a lot about cannabis, which is legal for adults. How can the daily use of things like alcohol or cannabis affect a man's mental health?
So anytime, we move away from what we'd call like occasional or social use and move into daily use as a means of coping, right? So there's a difference there, right? Going out to a barbecue and having a drink or two with friends is social and occasional use. Having to come home every day and have alcohol or other substances as a means of coping with the stress during the day is a sign that you are not using more healthy coping mechanisms to manage that stress. Because whether you're smoking weed or drinking alcohol or whatever it is that you're doing to excess, is just sort of putting a scab on the problem. It's actually not dealing with the underlying issues. And again, it could be stress and anxiety or worry or finances or whatever the issue is. It's just putting kind of a tamp on it and not really managing it from the origin side. And so I do worry about lifestyle factors, because those lifestyle factors, even smoking cigarettes or smoking marijuana or alcohol use, really does affect your overall physical health as well.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked about this before, but just to clarify, obviously adults different than when we talk about children, but even if you are of age, marijuana and alcohol are both considered depressants. Is that correct?
Yes, they are. And what we know is that often when you're using substances like that to manage your feelings, it is not uncommon that you get rebound anxiety. So, and alcohol also really disrupts sleep. So while for some people it might feel like, well, I need to relax in order to fall asleep at night, so they drink, they have several drinks most nights, or smoke marijuana or most nights as a way to manage those feelings. Those substances actually have rebound effects on your sleep and on your anxiety levels, so that you're not actually, you might be dealing in the moment, but you're not actually coming up with more long-term solutions to deal with those underlying issues.
And you might be, with too much use, be making things worse.
Very often with too much use, you're getting some negative physical effects as well.
So let's talk about stress management, other healthy ways to stress manage. As a female, I love to do things like yoga or meditate or go on a walk. I don't know that that's always would be my husband's way of de-stressing. What are some stress management techniques specifically that you find work well for men?
So I do think, physical activity works well for all of us. I also think I really want to also emphasize the need and the importance of social connection. The importance of men connecting with friends or doing other things socially, because that's often a way that, those might be people that they confide in. They might find that they're not the only one having problem X. One of their friends is having it too. So the importance of that social connection can be so, so transformative for, coming to an understanding that they need to address either their mental health issues or their physical health issues.
Are men more apt to release physically, like needing to go to the gym versus meditation or sitting more or writing more, or is that just a stereotype?
Well, here's the thing. Doing anything other than kind of using substances as a way to manage your stress or your worry or whatever underlying issues you're grappling with. Yes, do we feel like there might be some tendencies, but honestly, men who meditate are going to get just as much benefit as women who meditate. Men who go out for walks or play a round of golf, since we're talking about the TPC this week, or because then golf would also be social connection as well. To get together for lunch with or do something with your other friends, to make those connections and kind of release those feelings. So whatever you can do, men would benefit equally as much as women. I do think they tend to want to do more physical things. And so we certainly want to encourage women to do that as well. But whatever it is, you need to do something to better manage the stress, the tension, and the anxiety in your life.
Yeah. And just final thoughts. Men are human too, so I know we may have different ways of dealing with things, but the idea that we just have this open communication and that mental health is something that's discussed in the home, addressed in the home, and supported in the home, just like physical health.
Right. And sometimes it is dealing with the generational issues, right? How people were raised really has an impact on how they manage their stress and worry and other things that impact their lives. But to talk openly to your brother, your uncle, your spouse, your grandfather, your cousin, whoever it is, and tell them how much you love them, that you hope that they're able to take better care of themselves, and that because there are so many lifestyle factors, things that are within their control that they can do to improve their overall health and well-being. Absolutely. And so much empowerment there if you can even just do one thing at a time. I always think of your move a muscle, change a mood. So some great tips. Dr. Laura Saunders, thank you so much, coming to us from the Institute of Living as we talk about men's mental health. You can follow the CURES podcast, like and subscribe, share it with your friends. Also, we're always streaming on WFSB Plus and on WFSB.com. Dr. Saunders, thanks so much, as always, for being here. Thank you, Kara. And for everyone at home, we hope you have a great day. To all the dads out there, keep on being strong. Don't forget to ask for help in this month of Father's Day. Have a great day and be well.
CURES is sponsored by Wheeler Health's Better Choice program. More at wheelerhealth.org.